Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 5 Bytes Podcast. I'm your host, Rory Monahan, and the podcast, as always, is brought to you by my sponsors. That includes Numescent, the inventors of the first and only cloud-native container management platform for Windows desktops, and also brought to you by Master Packager, an application packaging software that helps you build packages that end users love, enterprises want, and the Windows OS needs. If you enjoy the show each week, you have these awesome sponsors to thank. And now for some news. Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference was held this week, and as predicted and covered on last week's episode of the podcast, they did announce rebranding for their operating systems and standardization on a naming convention that includes the year. So, for example, new names will include iOS 26, iPadOS 26, macOS 26, watchOS 26, tvOS 26, and visionOS 26. During the event, they also announced a new liquid glass design, which is basically an overhaul of the UI in the operating system. It essentially curves the buttons and menus and makes them look more transparent. I saw some comments suggesting it was like the old arrow effect in Windows Vista. Now, it's not quite as harsh as that, but it's not a million miles away either. I also saw some examples showing the screens with the transparency where it did not blend very well with the background, so hopefully that's something they address pretty quickly. They also announced for the mobile devices that now web pages in Safari will take up your entire screen. The camera app has also got a simplified layout that shows you two main options, photo and video, and you can swipe on the toolbar to reveal other options such as slow-mo and cinematic. The phone app is also getting an upgrade, as it will now have a layout that combines favorites, recents, and voicemails into one panel, while calls, contacts, and keypad remain on the bottom of the app. So essentially kind of cleaning up some of the navigation and views within certain apps on the operating systems. A pretty big announcement that was included in the article by The Verge that I'm referencing for this story is that Windows management is becoming a thing in the Apple operating systems. So it'll be easier to keep multiple open apps tidy and managed, which I think has been something that's sorely needed on Apple devices. I know I blogged about when I got my first MacBook, that was one of the pain points. I just prefer the way it was management for Windows and applications, and Windows was even at that time. And Windows has advanced in terms of window management since then. So it's nice that Apple will finally try to catch up in that regard. During the event, they also showed off smaller features like the ability for iPhones to notice on-hold music and to offer to call you back when an agent reconnects. They also showed off a new call vetting feature. So for unknown numbers, it will not disturb you and show the call on your phone. It will offer the person calling to leave a message. It will show you that message and then give you the opportunity to answer the call or not. Apple also announced they will let third-party app developers access the on-device large language model used by Apple Intelligence, allowing them to create their own tools using it. And that was really the only significant announcement in terms of AI during the conference. So they're certainly bucking the trend of, say, the Google I/O conference and Microsoft Build conference, which it's a bold move. And hey, maybe that's something that works. Maybe people are getting a little bit exhausted with all the AI stuff. So showing these more kind of traditional, tangible features might be a smart play on Apple's part. But hey, they also did announce this AI capability that should be something that attracts developers to expand their apps and leverage that on Mac or Apple devices. At risk of focusing too much on consumer technology right off the bat, I did notice that Microsoft also had their own announcement this week. They announced they would be launching their own handheld gaming console called Xbox Ally X. I think it's Ally, not Ally. I might be wrong. But this will run an optimized version of Windows 11 Home. So, Windows 11 is coming to a handheld gaming device near you soon. I saw this is being billed as Microsoft's answer to the popular Steam Deck devices, which I know are certainly popular with IT professionals. And they will have launch partners like Roblox, and obviously through Game Pass and years of Xbox releases, they also have a pretty large presence of partners and customers on the console side already, as well as PC gamers through Windows. So it would be interesting to see how they cultivate this going forward, and if this will truly be a competitor to other handheld game devices. Well, it was that time of the month again. It was Patch Tuesday, and this month's Windows updates addresses 66 flaws, including one actively exploited vulnerability and also another zero-day vulnerability that was publicly disclosed. The total roundup of the patches or vulnerabilities rather that have been patched this month includes 13 elevation of privilege vulnerabilities, 3 security feature bypass vulnerabilities, 25 remote code execution vulnerabilities, 17 information disclosure vulnerabilities, 6 denial of service vulnerabilities, and 2 spoofing vulnerabilities. So as I said, there was 2 zero-day vulnerabilities, one of them being already publicly exploited, but for a roundup of just those, first starting with CVE-2025-33053, and this is a web-distributed authoring and versioning remote code execution vulnerability. Successful exploitation of this vulnerability could allow a remote attacker to execute arbitrary code on an affected system. Microsoft's advisory states that a user must click on a specially crafted WebDAV URL for the flaw to be exploited, so I guess there is a mitigating circumstance, but not much of one, really. And unfortunately, this vulnerability has been exploited in zero-day attacks by an APT group named Stealth Falcon. So this is going to be one that you'll want to get patched as soon as possible. The other zero-day vulnerability is CVE-2025-33073, and this is a Windows SMB client elevation of privilege vulnerability. And of course, with this one, elevation of privilege vulnerability, attackers are able to gain system privileges on vulnerable devices through this vulnerability. To exploit the vulnerability in this case, an attacker could execute a specially crafted malicious script to coerce the victim's machine to connect back to the attack system using SMB and authenticate, and this could result in the elevation of privilege. For this one, Microsoft has not shared how the flaw was publicly disclosed. While there is a patch for this vulnerability obviously included with the Windows Update, they say that this flaw can reportedly be mitigated by enforcing server-side SMB signing using a group policy. Now, as is usually the case, it's early days yet. I'm recording this on Tuesday night. The Windows Updates just became available, and so far I don't see any obvious issues being caused by these Windows updates, but expect news of possible fallout caused by these Windows updates and problems to be reported over the next week or two. And of course, other vendors have also released their own updates as part of Patch Tuesday, including the likes of Cisco, Adobe, and more. In a pretty incredible follow-up to the M&S cyber attack that I first reported on around 6 weeks ago, reports by the Register suggest M&S has just recently started taking online orders again, but only for England, Wales, and Scotland at this time. It appears Ireland is not included and not yet applicable for these online orders. And click and collect continues to be unavailable. Even with the limited online options, standard shipping will take up to 10 days, so it's even longer than before. Of course, maybe this is just because they expect that there's backlog and there might be high demand as they re-enable this. M&S previously warned that website disruption could continue into July, but CEO Stuart Mackin said it would use the opportunity to accelerate the company's digital transformation. So that'd be interesting, right? If they're completely offline, maybe this is just a time to revamp and modernize everything. A little bit like some cities during COVID lockdowns took the opportunity to carry out pedestrianization of certain streets around the cities, maybe put cables that were overhead, underground, etc. So, hey, maybe this is an opportunity in disguise, and that disguise is a pretty horrible disruption to their business. But I also saw that their stock price increased at the news that they were returning to some online orders, even though it's limited right now. Ars Technica reports that Broadcom has now cut the lowest tier in their VMware Partner Program. In a blog post on Sunday, Broadcom executive Brian Motes announced that the Broadcom Advantage Partner Program for VMware resellers, which became the VMware Partner Program after the Broadcom acquisition, and they had eliminated the original one in January 2024, but they would now offer 3 tiers instead of 4, with the registered tier going the way of the dodo. The Register reported that most of the removed partners from this were inactive and lacked the capabilities to support customers through VMware's evolving private cloud journey. Ars Technica asked Broadcom to specify how many removed partners were inactive and what specific capabilities they lacked, but at least at the time of recording this, it seems they did not get a response. BleepyComputer.com has reported that the glue stack at React-native-aria packages in the Linux Package Manager NPM that has over 1 million downloads was compromised on June 6 to include malicious code that acts as a remote access Trojan. The supply chain attack was discovered by cybersecurity firm Akido Security, who discovered obfuscated code injected into the lib/index.js in several packages. GlueStack has now revoked an access token that was used to publish the compromised packages, and they are now marked as deprecated on NPM. A GlueStack developer posted on GitHub saying, quote, "Unfortunately, unpublishing the compromised version wasn't possible due to dependent packages. As a mitigation, I've deprecated the affected versions and updated the latest tag to point to a safe, older version." End quote. Well, this is just one of many instances of this type of thing happening. Unfortunately, we just all have to stay vigilant. Microsoft has released a PowerShell script to help restore the empty inetpub folder that was created by the April 2025 security updates if it was deleted. As Microsoft had previously warned, the folder helps mitigate a high-severity Windows process activation privilege escalation vulnerability, so it should not have been deleted, or at least not deleted maybe the traditional way. I believe there was a way to delete it where it would not necessarily affect things, but now if you need to restore it, there's a PowerShell script to restore it the proper way, I guess. The German Data Protection Authority, BFDI, has fined Vodafone, the telecommunications company, 45 million euros for privacy and security violations. BFDI said on Thursday, last Thursday that is, quote, "Due to malicious employees in partner agencies who broker contracts to customers on behalf of Vodafone, there have been fraud cases due to fictitious contracts or contract changes at the expense of customers, among other things." End quote. BFDI imposed a 15 million euro fine on Vodafone for failing to monitor partner agencies whose employees made unauthorized contract changes or tricked customers into signing fictitious contracts. They're hit with a second 30 million euro fine for authentication vulnerabilities of its Mine Vodafone or My Vodafone offering and the company's hotline, which allowed attackers to access customer eSIM profiles. BleepyComputer.com reported that a vulnerability allowed researchers to brute force any Google account's recovery phone number simply by knowing their profile name and an easily retrieved partial phone number. That creates a massive risk for phishing and SIM swapping attacks. The attack method involved abusing a now deprecated JavaScript disabled version of the Google username recovery form, which lacked modern anti-abuse protections. On June 6th, Google confirmed that it had fully deprecated the vulnerable Node.js recovery endpoint. So it's no longer a problem, but for a period there, it obviously was. So I put this one after the Vodafone story because I think both could be kind of implicated in SIM swapping attacks. Unfortunately, bad news on the job front. The unemployment rate for IT professionals spiked by nearly a full percentage point last month in the US, rising from 4.6% in April to 5.5% in May. It's the fifth month in a row that IT unemployment rate has exceeded the national average in the United States. A report by Janko indicates that most open IT positions involve large language models, blockchain technology, and omni-channel commerce. Outside of those areas, unfortunately, it appears to be slim pickings. Janko stated, quote, "IT opportunities for IT pros will be poor except for AI implementations which focus on improved productivity and staff reductions." End quote. Most job losses are in the telecommunications sector and in roles related to reporting, monitoring, and support. The hardest hit will be IT pros with legacy skills in smaller markets like Nashville and Tulsa, while pros in bigger locations like New York and Dallas should have an easier time, at least according to this one report. The Indeed website for job postings showed that AI-related job postings are up 117% year on year. Meanwhile, Janko predicts that the slowdown will continue throughout the year due to economic uncertainty and is predicting the third consecutive year of overall IT job shrinkage. And it's indicated that this is not just because of AI technology's emergence, but also because of those kind of economic issues caused by the sudden onset of tariffs and that kind of stuff. I certainly know just from attending a lot of conferences over the last few months that there are definitely a lot of people out of work in our sector. Hopefully this turns into the same kind of thing that cloud computing did, where initially there was, people are going to be laid off because we don't need people to manage infrastructure on premises anymore. Well, it turned out that managing cloud instances is quite complicated. So if anything, you need more skilled professionals. So maybe with AI implementations, there's going to be that increased need for IT professionals with technical skills. Hopefully. The FAA in the US reportedly plans to move away from their aging air traffic control systems, which unbelievably still rely on floppy disks and Windows 95 PCs. The FAA administrator stated, quote, "The whole idea is to replace the system. No more floppy disks or paper strips," end quote. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy called the project the most important infrastructure project that we've had in this country for decades, describing it as a bipartisan priority. The Transportation Department has set a 4-year timeline for completing the modernization project, though industry experts question whether this schedule is realistic given the scope and complexity involved. According to an NPR report, there's belief that the timeline is wildly optimistic, especially given the absence of a price tag for the sweeping plan. The FAA has announced several industry days where companies can present their technologies and proposals to department officials. The White House has not yet disclosed the expected cost of the modernization effort, and despite the financial uncertainty, Duffy emphasized the perceived urgency of the project, stating, quote, "Everyone agrees, this is nonpartisan, everyone knows we have to do it," end quote. And I saw John Oliver had an episode dedicated to the horrible state of air traffic control in the US, so yeah, this does seem like it should be a major priority. Microsoft has reportedly launched a new extended cybersecurity program for governments in the EU, UK, Monaco, and the Vatican. The key element of the program is reportedly the use of artificial intelligence to create actionable intelligence that will help in the timely detection and blocking of sophisticated attacks against these governments. Microsoft will provide real-time AI-driven threat insights tailored to the needs of each nation, leveraging the program and expanding access to intelligence from the Digital Crimes Unit and Threat Analysis Center. Microsoft will supply updates on foreign influence operations using deepfakes and deliver early warnings and remediation guidance for newly discovered vulnerabilities. Another important pillar in the new program is strengthening partnerships to identify new threats, develop defense measures, and disrupt cyber crime. Anthropic unveiled specialized AI models designed for U.S. national security customers. The company released what they call CloudGov models that were built in response to direct feedback from government clients to handle operations such as strategic planning, intelligence analysis, and operational support. The custom models reportedly already serve U.S. national security agencies with access restricted to those working in classified environments. The new CloudGov models handle classified materials, refuse less when engaging with classified information, and are customized to handle intelligence and defense documents according to Ars Technica. The models also feature what Anthropic calls enhanced proficiency in languages and dialects critical to national security operations. Finally, on the news for this week, the Wall Street Journal had an interesting article recently about the looming threat of AI for web traffic. Not just the likes of ChatGPT, Copilot, and Claude, but even the Google AI Overviews feature, and these seem to be making a massive dent in web traffic. It seems to be an immediate threat to online media sites in particular. At the New York Times, the share of traffic coming from organic search to the paper's desktop and mobile websites slid to 36.5% in April 2025 from almost 44% 3 years earlier. The Wall Street Journal's traffic from organic search was up in April compared with 3 years prior, though as a share of overall traffic, it had declined to 24% from 29%. Sherry Weiss, the chief marketing officer of Dow Jones in the Wall Street Journal, said that as the search landscape changes, the company is focusing on building trust with readers and earning habitual traffic. She said, quote, "As the referral ecosystem continues to evolve, we're focused on ensuring customers come to us directly out of necessity," end quote. Google executives have said the company remains committed to sending traffic to the web and that people who click on the links after seeing AI overviews tend to spend more time on those sites. The search giant also said it elevates links to news sites and doesn't necessarily show AI overviews when users search for trending news. Queries for content included in older articles and lifestyle stories, however, may produce an overview. When Dotdash merged with Meredith in 2021, Google Search accounted for around 60% of that company's traffic. Today, it's about 1/3. Overall traffic is growing thanks to efforts including newsletters and the My Recipes recipe locker. So it seems like the approach going forward for websites and media sites in particular is trying to basically get return customers to their sites and not relying on people finding their content via traditional means like a Google search or showing up in Google News, because people might be prompted with an AI overview and they just read that and they don't click on links after that. It's going to be a major problem, not just for news sites. It'll be a problem for bloggers and pretty much everyone online, I feel. Well, with that grim news, let's get on to this week's scripts, tricks, and tips. First up, NeoWin.net shared steps that you can use to get the new Start menu in Windows 11 without waiting in the preview for it to update and be present on your Windows 11 Insider Preview Edition. So if you'd like to try out the new Start menu that I believe I talked about on last week's or maybe even the week before that's episode, I'll share a link to that with this episode, which is again episode 390. Next up, EUC Forum and Workplace Ninjas UK takes place next week. So if you're around the UK or Scotland, specifically Edinburgh, next week there will be 3 days of events, because it starts with Workplace Ninjas UK for the first 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, and then it'll be EUC Forum on the Wednesday. And if you're going to EUC Forum, swing by the new Messam booth because I will be there. And finally, maybe just for some shameless self-promotion, by the time this podcast gets published, my webinar on Cloudpaging AI should be complete, but that means the on-demand recording should be available, so I'll share a link to that if you want to learn about Cloudpaging AI and how you can leverage AI for packaging and automating the packaging of consumer off-the-shelf applications into Cloudpaging containers, making application updates manageable and also lower risk. But that's it for this week's episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening.